Okay, so today we're diving into some pretty wild stuff, like really wild.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at possible connections between the ancient Mediterranean and the Near East and the early history of the British Isles. And our sources for this deep dive, well, let's just say they present some very unique interpretations of history. We're talking a dark race in Ireland, links back to Syria and Egypt. It's going to be a fascinating ride.
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head there. It's crucial to remember right from the get-go that some of what we're going to be discussing today falls outside what's typically considered mainstream history. But that's okay. Our goal here isn't to say, yes, this is definitely true, or no, this is absolutely false. It's more about, understanding what these sources are saying and how they try to connect these different parts of the world, these seemingly very distant regions.
Exactly. Exactly. So our journey, it begins with a look at East Syrian Christianity. And we're talking influence as far as China. Yeah, pretty amazing. Then we're going to think about Abraham, this huge figure in multiple world religions and his lasting impact. And finally, we're going to really dig into some theories that try to link the Near East directly to the very first peoples and cultures of Britain and Ireland. I mean, these are some seriously provocative historical interpretations that our sources lay out. So let's start with that fascinating East Syrian connection in China.
Okay, so what we have here, it's a Syro-Turkic style found in Quanzhou, China. I mean, just think about that for a second. An artifact in China with inscriptions in Syriac and a Turkic language, right alongside Chinese characters.
Wow. Yeah.
Talk about a multicultural mix.
Exactly. Yeah. It really highlights how interconnected the ancient world was. And it's not just some random inscription either, right? I mean, this stele, it features a cross. And get this, it's got clouds and what's described as flames flanking it. I mean, that imagery screams Christian presence. Specifically Nestorian Christianity, the branch that spread east along the Silk Road.
Absolutely. It's like a beacon of Christian culture, thousands of miles from where it all began.
Totally. And the inscription itself, it actually has the Syriac word for tomb kabra. But here's the kicker. It's got a Turkic possessive ending psi attached to it. So this wasn't just a Christian tomb. It was a Christian tomb belonging to someone of Turkic origin within this East Syrian Christian community in China. It's wild.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And this is where things get even more interesting. Our source connects this all to the Toba, also known as the Toba people. They were powerful in North China during the Northern Wei dynasty.
Oh, right.
And apparently the term Tagak or Tabgak, these were terms used to refer to them, might even have been a way of saying Chinese back in the day.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So imagine that. Syrian Christian culture mixed with Turkic and possibly early Chinese populations. It really shows how history, it isn't always so neat and tidy, These cultures were all bumping into each other and influencing one another.
You got it. And, when we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, this discovery really underscores the reach of cultural and religious influence back then. We're talking connections spanning entire continents.
Yeah.
It's just mind-blowing. And in that same source, there's even a mention of Armenians among Indian Christians, just further proof of these complex intercultural exchanges happening all over the East. So from there, let's shift our focus westward to a figure whose story has shaped so much of the world. Abraham.
Okay, Abraham, yeah. His narrative is foundational to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Our Wikipedia source lays out what's called the Abraham cycle in Genesis, right?
Right.
And this is presented as a story of tension, really, between God's promise to Abraham, countless descendants, and a specific land and all these obstacles that keep popping up and threatening that promise.
It's true. That whole obstacle story structure, it's a powerful literary device, one that pops up again and again across different cultures throughout history. It's a classic way to tell a story.
Yeah, for sure.
And for Abraham, the cycle begins with these two key elements. Sarah, his wife, she can't have children. And God tells him, Abraham, you got to leave your home, go to this land that I'll show you.
Right.
So you've got the promise of descendants and the promise of land. And these two things, they drive the whole drama.
Exactly. Those are the core elements. And as the story goes on, we see Abraham interacting with all sorts of figures, including Abimelech in Gerar, which is in a region the Bible calls the land of the Philistines.
Right.
But here's the thing. The Philistines, historically, they weren't actually around in that area back then. It's like a historical anachronism.
It is, and it raises some questions about when and why these stories were actually written down. I mean, the figure of Abraham, he probably has very ancient origins, and his name itself, it might have originally meant something like Father is exalted. But our source, Wikipedia, points to a consensus among scholars that the Pentateuch, where we find Abraham's story, it was mostly written down during the Persian period, roughly between 520 and 320 BCE. So centuries after the events they described.
So we're not talking about eyewitness accounts here.
Right, exactly. And why it was compiled then, well, that's still debated. But some theories suggest it was a way to give a legal and social framework for the Jewish community coming back from exile in Persia.
Right.
Help them define their identity and their structure of authority.
That makes sense. Yeah. So it's not just a straightforward historical account. It's more complex than that.
Much more.
Yeah. And of course, Abraham isn't just central to Judaism, right?
Oh, definitely not.
I mean, he's deeply revered in Christianity and Islam as well.
Absolutely.
So for some Christian theologians, that encounter he has with three visitors,
Yes.
that's interpreted as a theophany, the
Yeah.
appearance of the Holy Trinity.
Mm.
In Islam, Abraham, or Ibrahim, he's a crucial link in the chain of prophets, from Adam all the way to Muhammad.
Right.
He's seen as a Hanif, like a primordial monotheist, a Muslim in the sense of someone who submits to God. And he's revered as the restorer of the Kaaba in Mecca. It's amazing how important he is to all three faiths.
It truly is remarkable how one figure connects these major religious traditions.
Yeah. And our Wikipedia source, it also lists legendary ancestors from different cultures.
Oh, right.
Interestingly, along with figures like Manu from Hinduism and Embla from Norse mythology, we find Spain, a key figure in Irish mythology,
Interesting.
often linked to the arrival of the Gaels in Ireland. I mean, just including in their hints at the kinds of unexpected connections we're about to get into in this next section.
Exactly. It's like it's setting the stage for these more unconventional theories, the ones that propose even more direct links, going way back between the Near East and the first people to inhabit Britain and Ireland.
Okay, so now we're heading into some really fascinating and, well, potentially controversial territory.
Yeah.
Our next source is a text called The Phoenician Origin of Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons.
Okay.
And this lays out a very bold, actually a pretty radical theory.
All right, I'm listening.
It claims that the Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons, they actually have their roots in Phoenicia and Sumeria.
Wow, that's a big claim. I mean, that's a complete departure from how we usually understand the origins of these groups.
Exactly. This is where our deep dive takes a very sharp turn.
So how does he back up this idea?
Well, the author, A. Waddell, he bases his argument on his own interpretations of various archaeological finds and inscriptions in Britain. One key piece of evidence he uses is the Newton stone inscription in Scotland.
Okay.
He says it's written in what he calls Aryan Phoenician script, dates it to around 400 BC, and claims it refers to a figure named Pardalon as not only king of the Scots and Britain, but also Hittite and Phoenician.
Okay, so he's packing a lot of identities into one person.
He is, yeah. And his theory doesn't stop there.
Oh, boy.
He also says he's cracked the code of prehistoric cut marks. You know, those circular carvings found on rocks and megaliths all over Britain.
Yeah.
He believes they're not just random designs, but actual records of our ancestors, revealing what he calls their exalted ideals. He uses this and other evidence to argue that the Bronze Age in Britain started much earlier than conventionally thought, and to identify the origins of the people who brought it here. Essentially, he's rewriting a huge part of British prehistory.
Okay, so he's really going for it. He's not holding back.
Not at all. One particularly interesting thing he does is he connects the ancient Kadi, the Hittites of Asia Minor, with the Syro-Phoenician coast, and he says they refer to themselves as Ari, which he translates as noble ones.
Okay.
And then he points out that this is the exact same title used by the Indo-Aryans.
So he's seeing a linguistic link there.
He is, and from that, he makes a big jump. He claims he's not only found the origin of the Indo-Aryans, but the original homeland of the whole Aryan race, plus the Goths, and importantly for us, the ancestors of the Britons and Anglo-Saxons.
That's a massive claim to make based on one word.
It is, yeah. But he's proposing this shared fundamental identity across a huge geographical and cultural space.
So shared origins for groups that are usually considered quite distinct.
Exactly. He even talks about prehistoric monuments to the deity Bel in Britain that feature what he calls Hiddo-Phoenician sun crosses, suggesting a direct religious connection, like Near Eastern religious ideas were transplanted to the British Isles way back when.
Okay, when he says Hiddo-Phoenician sun crosses, I mean, that's his interpretation of those symbols.
Right, exactly. It's important to remember that. And he acknowledges that there are undeciphered Phoenician inscriptions in Britain. And and he offers his own readings of them, which often differ a lot from other scholars' attempts. Like, for example, he says the name of the Scottish mountain Banashee might be connected to a Phoenician king he calls Penig,
Okay.
whom he believes helped civilize that part of Britain. It's very specific, very unconventional.
It is. It's definitely outside the box.
Very much so. Now, when he talks about Partalon, the figure mentioned on the Newton stone, according to his reading, he interprets the title Cilician, which he claims appears in both Phoenician and Ogham scripts on the stone,
Right.
as a direct link to Cilicia, a region in Asia Minor. That was historically under Phoenician influence and had the important port city of Tarsus, which he connects to the biblical Tarshish.
So he's weaving together the inscription, broader history, and even biblical references.
Yeah, he's building these chains of connections. And then he makes a comparison between the patronym Barat, found among the Kassi in ancient Babylonia and Syria Phoenicia,
Okay.
and similar sounding names and titles associated with early inhabitants of Britain,
Like what?
like Brihad, and the Welsh word for Britain, Prydain. He even says that the name Britannia itself and the imagery on early British coins come from the Phoenician goddess Barati.
Wow, that's challenging conventional etymologies pretty directly.
Oh yeah, he's not afraid to do that. He goes on to suggest that the Vedic name for Britannia was Bara, meaning belonging to the Bharats. And he connects that to the Sarasvati River in India, which he then identifies with the Saras River in Cilicia. It's this really complex web of linguistic and geographical connections.
He's creating a whole alternate history here.
He is, yeah. He even looks at different Anglo-Saxon spellings of Britain as supposed evidence for these links back to the Near East.
It's very intricate, but it's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Another connection he makes is he says clan titles like Galawuni come from Hittite.
Okay.
He links it to the term Kalani, which refers to a specific style of Cilician Hittite architecture. And he even suggests that the word Ka for town in Shetland, that it's Hittite, and possibly explains similar prefixes like Ka or Gau in Scottish place names like Glasgow and Cadzow. He's building his case through these linguistic echoes.
I see, yeah, like these little hints and traces in language.
Yeah, exactly. He then recounts the story of Partalon's migration from Cilicia to Britain around 390 BC,
Okay.
which he links to the Spartan invasion of Asia Minor.
Right.
And he even tries to fit the biblical figure of Bartholomew into this, suggesting he was an Aryan Phoenician whose relics followed a similar sea route. So he's not just using language and archaeology.
You're bringing in biblical and legendary figures, too.
Yeah, he's trying to blend it all together.
Yeah.
Now, shifting to early Ireland, he talks about the tradition of a female leader named Cessair leading the first migration there. And he interprets this as a possible sign of matrilineal customs in early Ireland, associated with a Ban or Bean race, which he then equates with the Aboriginal dark dwarf people of Ireland and Alban.
Okay.
The Blue Legs, mentioned in the Norse Eddas, whom he identifies as the ancestors of the Picts. He even links this to Lake Van, the source of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
So a geographical connection to these Van people.
Yeah, exactly. And he proposes that these, what he calls matriarchist Vans, they introduced the serpent cult into Ireland.
Wow.
And he offers a very different interpretation of Bridget, suggesting she evolves from an aboriginal matriarch wizardess, kind of like the Norse goddess Frigg. These are interpretations that really go against the grain.
Yeah, they definitely challenge mainstream understandings.
They do. Now, all this leads to the question of the Picts.
The Picts, always a mystery.
Right. They pop up in historical records relatively late, then seem to vanish. Waddell's theory is that they were the pre-Aryan Aboriginal inhabitants of Britain and Ireland.
Okay.
Possibly with a riverbed-type build, long-headed, small stature.
Interesting.
He believes their remains have been found across Britain. He even interprets Partalon's arrival as an attempt to abolish these matriarchal customs, phrasing it as taking their women from them.
So a clash of cultures.
Yeah, exactly. He then brings up Strabo's writings on the Celtdi and Iberian.
The Celts and Iberians.
Yeah, and he points out that neither Caesar nor Tacitus called the people of Britain or Hibernia Celts.
So where did the name Celt come from then?
That's what he's getting at. He suggests it was introduced to Britain later on.
Okay.
He even describes the Celtic area race in Scotland, long head and face, dark hair, as possibly lining up with this earlier Aboriginal type. He's making a distinction between those early people and the later arrival of what we now think of as Celtic culture.
I see. Yeah, he's complicating the picture.
Very much so. And he interprets Caesar's quick retreat from Britain not as a defeat,
Uh-huh.
but as a result of facing unexpectedly strong resistance from people who were already civilized.
Okay.
He also highlights the pre-Roman exploration of Britain by Pythias of Phocea.
Right, the Greek explorer.
Yeah, but Waddell calls Phocea a Phoenician colony. This was around 350 BC, and Pythias mapped the British Isles. Waddell even tries to make a case for the early British chronicles about Brutus the Trojan and his influence in Britain, noting connections between Trojan and British solar symbols.
So he's incorporating those more legendary accounts as well.
Exactly. And then he starts listing place names in Britain that he thinks come directly from the Near East.
Really? Like what?
So he says the river Avon might be linked to the Aben River of Damascus, an important Hittite city.
Oh, okay.
He sees Barton as preserving the Barat patronym,
Mm-hmm.
Selsey, meaning Isle of the Cilicians.
Right.
The river Ouse, named after the Aben River of Epirus.
Interesting.
And even the Thames, coming from the Thymus River of Epirus. It's a whole list of etymological connections, but very speculative, of course.
Yeah, it's a lot of possible connections there.
It is. He even says that the early Britain language was similar to the Doric dialect of ancient Greek, using that as further evidence for a Mediterranean influence on the language.
Okay.
And he emphasizes how advanced ancient British law codes seem compared to other medieval European nations.
I see. So he's suggesting a legacy of a more developed civilization.
Yeah, that's his argument. Then he comes back to that Barat patronym,
Okay.
saying it's reflected in Old British place and ethnic names like Moor, Cumber, Kimmer, and Summer, always linking back to his Phoenician origin theory. He specifically connects Penzance and Cornwall, the ancient Cassitarides or Tin Islands, to the Cassi clan of the Hitto-Phoenician Barats and their tin mining.
Which was a big deal back then.
Oh yeah, huge. He dates it back to 2800 BC, or even earlier.
Hmm.
This ties into Cornwall's historical importance as a source of tin, possibly for Mediterranean powers even that far back.
And that tin trade, it would have connected Britain to the wider Mediterranean world for sure.
Exactly. He also mentions Cassi, or Cass, stamped coins found in Britain, similar to Caddy coins with solar symbols.
Okay.
And he finds it strange that some historical accounts of megalith building in Britain don't mention Phoenicians, despite what he sees as clear evidence. He points to what he interprets as Syrian, meaning Phoenician art motifs on early British monuments and coins, as more evidence for this link.
So he's pulling together all these different threads.
He is, yeah. And then he introduces the Cro-Magnon type, also called the Red Man, found in Britain.
Okay.
Tall stature, long heads, and the remains are found with what he considers basic stone weapons and ivory ornaments.
All right.
He says the markings on the Keswick stone are Sumerian and mean seeing the rising sun. He talks about standing stones in Britain as maybe ancient law courts, perhaps reflecting legal traditions brought from elsewhere.
It's like he's painting a picture of a much more complex and interconnected ancient Britain than we usually imagine.
Exactly. And he even delves into possible Sumerian origins for numbers and the names of gods, like Anna, representing the one, so sun god, and Zag as a precursor to Zeus. He interprets cut marks and spiral patterns and iris